Before I get into my main topic, Madam President, I just wanted to briefly respond to something that the senator from New York, our Democrat leader, said regarding the tax cuts bill that passed in 2017. The Democrats, none of whom voted for it, obviously, have not ceased criticizing the passage of that tax relief bill, notwithstanding the significant economic progress that we've seen as a result of its passage, coupled with relief from regulations and other policies that have been implemented by this president working with the Congress, to the point where you have historic economic data to report. I mean, we have record unemployment rates all across the country, and we've seen record wage increases. Senator from New York talked about how this hasn't benefited working Americans. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you look at the data, it's very clear that wage rates are growing, and they're growing at the fastest rate in over a decade. You've got actually more jobs available today in this country than you do people looking for jobs. Also a historic first, and something that's been now happening for many months in a row. So record low unemployment, record high wages, and growth in the economy that we haven't seen in over a decade either. 3.1% in calendar year, fourth quarter over fourth quarter, is the first time we've seen 3%, north of 3% growth in our economy since 2005. So it's pretty clear, if you look at the evidence, that the tax relief bill that was passed by the Congress and signed into law by the President in late 2017 is having the desired effect. And with respect to the arguments that were made about this is what's contributing to the debt and the deficit, there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal by a former colleague of ours, Senator Phil Gramm from Texas here, just this last week, which pointed out that the Congressional Budget Office has adjusted its projections when it comes to growth in the economy since the tax bill passed. In 2017, when it was in the process of being passed, the CBO was projecting 2% growth in 2018, 1.7% growth in 2019. They have now modified those projections to 2.9% in 2018 and 2.7% in 2019. And what that means is additional percentage point of growth means higher government revenues. And in fact, the CBO has adjusted their projections with respect to government revenues upward by about $1.2 trillion over the next decade. $1.2 trillion would be about 80% of what the tax bill, projected cost of the tax bill was, about $1.5 trillion. And we predicted at the time that we would see additional economic growth as a result of passage of tax reform and allowing individuals and businesses, whether they're organized as C Corps or whether they're organized as pass-throughs, to benefit from these provisions and changes in the tax code, faster cost recovery, lower rates that would encourage them to invest and grow and expand their operations. That's exactly what's happened. And as a result of that, you've seen government revenues, according to CBO, based on their projections, going up and up by over $1 trillion. And again, that almost 80% of pays for the cost of the tax bill that the Democrats are so quick to criticize as contributing to the deficit and the debt. So, Madam President, I would argue that if you look at the facts are stubborn things. If you look at the record, if you look at the data, if you look at the statistics, all point to the impact that tax reform and other pro-growth policies that have been implemented by the Trump administration and this Republican Congress are having the desired effect. We are seeing increases in wages. We are seeing, obviously, a tremendous impact on growth and on jobs in this economy, and that's good for American workers. Obviously, when you reduce tax rates, that hopefully benefits everybody, but when you have a growing, vibrant, robust economy, that lifts all the boats. Everybody benefits from that, and we're seeing the effect of that as a result of those policies. So I know the Democrats all voted against it, so they have every reason, I suppose, to try and criticize it, but if you look again at the facts, if you look at the record, if you look at the actual data, you get a very different conclusion from the one that they're trying to put forward and advance. Madam President, last week we confirmed John Fleming to be Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. The story of his confirmation process has been a familiar one over the past 2+ years. A non-controversial nominee being forced to languish in limbo for months because Democrats won't agree to move the nominee forward outside of the lengthy cloture process. Madam President, as senators, we have to take our confirmation responsibility seriously. And sometimes that means that we oppose a candidate who raises serious concerns about his or her suitability for the position for which he or her has been nominated. What it should not mean is that we reflexively slow walk qualified candidates simply because we don't like the president that's doing the nominating. But that is what Democrats have done over the past 2 years, over and over and over again. Again and again, the president has put up a qualified candidate that Democrats don't really object to. And again, they've forced the leader to file cloture on the nomination, delaying confirmation for weeks or months. And how do we know that Democrats didn't have genuine objections to a lot of these candidates? We have the Democrats' votes to prove it. Nearly half of the recorded cloture votes in the 115th Congress received the support of 60 or more senators when it came to a vote. More than a third of the recorded cloture votes ultimately received 70 or more votes in support. That means that more than a third of the time, 17 or more Democrats voted in support of ending debate on a nomination and moving forward to a vote. And yet in each of those instances, Democrats delayed the nomination from coming to a vote by forcing the leader to file cloture. In one particularly egregious instance of obstruction, Democrats forced the Senate to spend more than an entire week considering 4 district court judges, even though not one single Democrat voted against their confirmation. That's right, Madam President, not one single Democrat voted against their confirmation. These judges could have been confirmed in minutes by a voice vote. Instead, Democrats forced the Senate to spend more than an entire week considering the nominations, a week that could have been spent on the many issues, serious issues that are facing this country, or a week that could have been spent on nominations that actually needed to be debated on the Senate floor. Madam President, during the 115th Congress, Senate Democrats forced 128 cloture votes on President Trump's nominees. 128 cloture votes. You want to know how many cloture votes Republicans forced during President Obama's first Congress, his first 2 years in office? 12. Madam President, in our democracy, you win some elections and you lose some elections. That's the way it goes. Sometimes you're a big fan of the person in the White House and sometimes you're not. That's the nature of free elections. That's the nature of life in a democracy. But 2+ years on, Democrats still can't accept that they lost the 2016 presidential election. And so they spent the past 2 years doing everything they can to oppose the president, even if the American people get hurt as a result. Madam President, there's a reason that senators during previous administrations have not objected to votes on a president's nominees, even when they didn't like the president. It's because senators have generally recognized that a president needs to fill vacancies in the executive branch so that the work of the government can get done. Senators have also tended to think that a president duly elected by the American people deserves to be able to staff the administration that the American people have chosen. But Democrats have apparently decided that it's more important for them to be able to express their antipathy to President Trump than for the government to be able to get its work done. Democrats' unprecedented obstruction has also eaten up time the Senate could have been spending on other priorities, from growing our economy to making health care more affordable to helping Americans save for education and for their retirement. Madam President, I'd like to suggest to my Democrat colleagues that 2 years is long enough for throwing a tantrum over the 2016 presidential election. It might be time to accept the election results and to work with Republicans to confirm the president's nominees in a timely fashion. After 2+ years of Democrat obstruction, I'm not holding out a lot of hope, but there's always a chance that Democrats will decide that it's time to stop playing partisan games and to start focusing on the business of the American people. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.